Hi, everyone. I'm here today with Hembury Books' first returning author, Bruce Lowery, to launch his second book, Out of Time, which continues on from his adventures in Catch the Wind. So welcome, everybody, and welcome, Bruce.
Thank you. Good to be here, Suze. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So, Bruce, congratulations. I think we have to say on your second memoir. It's such a great achievement. Thank you for trusting Hembury Books to come back again. So can I ask you, what is the first feeling that comes to mind being published twice? And was it possibly easy the second time around?
Yeah, the overriding feeling is one of relief. These stories have been stuck in my head for a long time, so it's really good to get them down on the page. So, yeah, really enjoyed the whole process again, and it probably was a bit easier, no question, because I knew the pitfalls and how to avoid them thanks to the help of good people at Hembury. It was good.
Wonderful, wonderful. So we should start with just a brief overview to set the scene for our listeners and our viewers today.
Yes, as you said before, it follows on from the story that started with my first memoir, Catch the Wind. That finished off where I was in Western Australia, and on impulse I returned to Melbourne to try and reattach to a girlfriend, and that unfortunately didn't quite work out. So the story then quickly moves to Queensland, where I joined the shearing sheds of that.
Yes, I did. I really did love, I guess, the contrast between then and now. I really enjoyed being transported back in times gone by. Do you think kids these days would work as hard and have as much spirit as you and your mates did?
It's hard to say, of course. There's been a lot of time since the late 60s. I'd like to think that youngsters would cope. It was a matter of survival, and when you put yourself into those positions, you didn't have much choice other than go away and run away from the situation. I would never go to do that. So, no, I think many of the youngsters today would have a go at it and see and would survive in the same way that I did.
I certainly enjoy the fact that you just made a decision and went for it. It created a very propulsive read because you were always on the go and you always had a plan, even if it happened in the last minute.
Yeah, very much last minute, yes. And I think because of the situation with my girlfriend and not being able to rejoin with her, I think that put a lot of, it made me take heavier risks than I would otherwise do, and that shows in the book. I think there's some pretty hairy moments throughout the book, and I think they happened because I was taking impulsive and risky moves along the way.
Yeah, I did have a question around your impetuousness, I guess you could say. You weren't a rev head and you didn't seem to be a fighter by choice, but you did make rash decisions. Did regret ever come into things?
I'm not a believer in regret, and I think you've made your choices in life. You've got to live with them, and that's what I certainly did. I guess this is the book really portrays a very interesting period in time in Australia, and a bit of a time capsule, if you will. The late 60s had come off the back of a very conservative era in Australia. We've gone through the recession in the 30s, the Second World War in the 40s. So people after that period were really very, very conservative. And it wasn't until we baby boomers suddenly hit the scene that we realised that we wanted life to be more adventuresome. So things were changing at quite a pace. The birth contraception pill had just been introduced into Australia a couple of years before. So that changed many young people's attitudes towards sexual engagements, so that was certainly the case. But more than that, there was a change in fashions, a change in attitude. We had long hair, and before that, everybody had, particularly blokes, that had short and back and side haircuts. Music had moved on from the early days of rock in the late 50s and early 60s. It had moved on and got a harder bluesy edge to it. So we were all captivated by this, and it was just a groundswell of change throughout that time. And that was really evident in all the capital cities of Australia, no question of that. But once you moved into the outback, and it was like going back to the 50s again. And even more so in the shearing sheds, it was like going back to the 80s. Nothing had changed since that time. So there's this juxtaposition of me the likes of me and the other people in that people at that time, we all progressive with our ideas, and all of a sudden to be confronted in the Australian outback by this ultra conservatism again was a very interesting time.
The music grabbed me, and I love fashion. So your bell bottoms, your red bell bottoms, and your long hair, and of course blokes took umbrage to that. They some blokes didn't like someone different and probably felt a bit threatened by your individualism, and there was a fair few barbs, and some blokes really appreciating it.
Yeah, absolutely. Not so much in the cities, but as I said before, once I moved into the bush and the shearing sheds, I mean, those guys were astonished with the way I appeared. I was certainly a one out. I was the only one that had long hair, and my whole attitude, as I said before, was quite progressive. So it was like walking back into testosterone city. There's a huge amount of competition between people. Typically, shearers are always competing with each other anyway, because there's always one gun shearer in a shed. But that competition really seeped through to all of the other people in the shed, and there was competition about who could eat the most food. I mean, who could drive their cars fastest. Everybody was ultra competitive, and with me appearing on the scene being a bit different, I had to really prove myself, and under some duress at times. Yeah, very interesting.
I think I sensed your sensibility. You always seem to be. I mean, I know you got belted a bit, but I always seem to sense that, I don't know, I guess the shearers were rough in a 40-degree heat, and it was kind of awful. But I don't know, am I wrong in saying that you did have your head screwed on?
Yeah, I relished all the challenges and the opportunities, no question about it. I've been toughened up considerably in my time in the shearing, in the sheep stations in West Australia. So I wasn't fully prepared for how different it was going to be in the shearing sheds, but I'd learned how to cope with difficult circumstances, and I embraced it really, and I think most of the crew there eventually found that I wasn't such a bad bloke after all. Not quite so unusual.
No, it was really fun, those parts of the book. When you're a city person, like probably a lot of your readers, it will be eye-opening and very entertaining. So let's have a quick chat about Trish. And I kind of was going to ask you to describe the emotional turmoil, which was the whirlwind known as Trish, because it was all pretty full on, and it drove everything you did, and in essence was the driving factor to the book and your travels. So tell us a bit about that, just briefly, and then we can talk more about other things.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, she was the catalyst for a lot of this travelling. In the first memoir, Catch the Wind, I described some unforeseen circumstances that arose. I had been going out with Trish for more than 12 months. I'd been going out with her since I was 16. A very intense affair, and these unfortunate events occurred, meant an enforced separation between the two of us. And so that was the reason I started travelling in the first place. Knee-jerk reaction, took off with very little money, and the passion I had for her just wouldn't go away. So that's why I came back to Melbourne to try and elope with her. I think that was probably a very overly ambitious project, because she was under wraps. Her parents and even the police had enforced this separations. It was always going to, with the benefit of hindsight, it was always going to fail, I think. And that's when I spent a few days, probably 10 days at home, trying to reconnect with her. And that makes some interesting reading, I think, just that my attempts to try and elope with her.
It does. That part of the story, it makes you want to keep reading, and it makes the reader want to know how it ends. So there is a little bit of an edge of your seat thing happening, I have to say, as a reader. We always want
to... that's interesting that you should say that. It was certainly edge of the seat for that. I took quite some risks trying to reconnect with her, as I say, but it didn't work out. And again, on the spur of the moment, I met a guy called Greg Fanning in the pub, and he said he was now shearing, and he was heading back to Queensland the very next morning, 6:30 in the morning, to go shearing again. And I said, well, can I come with you? And will I get a job there? And he said, well, you can certainly come with me. I can't guarantee a job, but you can come with me. So 6:30 the next morning, we were off.
See, that's the wonderful part of it. And one of my questions for you was about meeting interesting people. So, you met so many interesting folk on your travels. Was that part of the appeal? Do you enjoy do you enjoy meeting people? You stumbled into so many characters along the way.
Yeah.
And that makes for interesting reading as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, the whole book is character driven because some of the people I met were just amazing people, and some of them not so pleasant. There was a policeman that made life very difficult on our way up to Queensland for 24 hours. That's well documented in the book. There's also what is also well documented. As I said before, there's a lot of competition in the shearing sheds, and one of them was to be the best fighter in the shed. So there was one fellow that was ultimately recognised as being a bully boy. His nickname was Knuckles. So that was a very interesting part, trying to avoid him, but ultimately I couldn't avoid him for too long. And it is quite an outcome that is well described in the book with my stoush with Knuckles.
You did seem to be able to just get yourself out of those moments and move on to the next. And yeah, there's so many great themes, I guess you could say. So this is really important to me, and I think, and I know it was for you as a writer. So the sense of love for your family and for your home, and you don't necessarily need to be there to have that sense of belonging and being at home. Are you proud to devote this piece of work to the memory of your parents? So I was very moved by your dedication to them back then and now through the book.
Yes, yeah. Look, there is the main narrative of the book, of course, is my travel adventures and meeting wonderful people in the Australian bush. But there's a second narrative that runs through the book quite deliberately. It's a bit of a memorial to my parents and family, and they had emigrated to Australia about 12 years before the setting of this book in the mid-50s. The family had grown quickly from two children to 6, and it was pretty tough going for a young family coming out to Australia at that time. There was an awful lot of love within that family, and still is. The adversities and the difficulties really were quite profound. And so I wanted to record that in their memory, and it makes an interesting reading because it does what I've tried to do is to convey to readers the period of time and how it affected people in different walks of life. So the home life is conveyed quite clearly in the book, mainly through excerpts of letters, because I've kept all those letters all these years, and so I was able to reread those letters, put excerpts from them in the book, and it paints a very clear picture of my mother and my father, and also mates back home too, but particularly the family and what was happening with the family at that time. And of course, during the book, I returned home for a brief period of a week, 10 days. And so I was able to also explain to the reader a bit more about my family background, which is dear to me, of course.
Yeah, I enjoyed the then and now aspect of the postal mail and the delayed gratification. There's no, you have to wait for these things. So once you took your time and you went to a cafe and you had a bite to eat and you read a letter, and another time you just ripped it open then and there because that was your only connection to your beloved family.
Absolutely. At that period in time, youngsters would perhaps be mildly surprised to realise that there were no mobile phones, there was no internet, there was no texting. Ringing on a landline was horrendously expensive. If you rang from Queensland, the cost was just prohibitive. So the one way to stay in contact with friends and family was via letters, and I would write 3, 4, even 5 letters a week, and I'd receive almost as many coming back. So thank goodness that happened, because those letters stayed with me. I preserved them, and it was just wonderful to reread them and enjoy them, and it guided the narrative in the book very clearly.
I did sense a lot of humour in your book, so I think it's important having some humour in telling personal stories and connecting with the audience. Did it come to you naturally? My favourite little line was, without spoilers, it included words like something was eating my person. There was funny bits here and there.
Well, I tried to inject a bit of humour because I have to say that times were so tough and working things like places like the shearing shed, that you had to have a good sense of humour, and it was black humour at times, but it was certainly there. And I've tried to capture that in the book very much because it was the thing that really did keep us going, and I think it's also that self-deprecating type of humour also in particular was very important. I hope that comes through in the book. I think it does, and I think there's a fair few chuckles along the way through this book. It's not all dark and difficulties. It's there's a lot of good humour in it, and I think people will enjoy a laugh too.
There certainly is. It's a bit cheeky, and it's that Aussie, the mateship and the larrikinism and the making friends, straight away with someone you don't even know. And then, they turned into lifelong mates because you put, I don't know, we didn't call it a prologue, did we? But you did put, you had follow-ups about your friendships and who you still stay in touch with. And
yeah, in the postscript, I was to wrap everything up, and some of those mates have passed on since that time, sadly, but many of them are still alive, and I'm in contact with most of them. Not so much the guys in the shearing sheds; they kind of disappeared in my life. But my mates back home, and some of the guys I travelled with, yeah, I still stay in contact with them. They've read copies of the books, and they were very interested in the stories, rereading the stories, because it was part of their life too, of course.
And even we won't spoil, but there was even a coupling, even a relationship formed with a couple of people mentioned along the way.
Yes,
it's always nice for the reader to find out what happens afterwards.
Yeah, I tried to wrap it up reasonably well in the 3 or 4 pages at the end of the book, because some of those characters really come to life in the book, and it's important that people understand what happened with them eventually.
A bit of a reading question for you, Bruce. So I could tell that you enjoyed reading because there was no phone to scroll, and you don't read your phone when you're on the bus. You need to fill the time with old-fashioned things like reading. So you were gifted a couple of books on the trip. I think was it the classic you were reading? That was pretty saucy.
There was several that I made mention to. Lady Chatterley's Lover,
yeah,
which I picked up obscurely in a general store in Syngenta, I think it was, coming back on the bus from West Australia. And it was under the counter because it was banned. It was never a very good selection of books, so I took it. And I was so disappointed when I got back to the bus because I saw it was written in the 1930s. And I thought, this is going to be terribly boring. Well, it wasn't. Boy, Lady Chatterley's Lover, that's spicy. Yeah, absolutely. So it kept me very well entertained from Syngenta to Melbourne. It was terrific.
And you're still a reader?
Oh, absolutely, yes, yeah. Along with music, reading is the real passion in my life. Absolutely, yes. I read avidly. It's usually non-fiction. I'm currently reading a book about the life of Anita Pallenberg. For those that don't know that name, she was heavily involved in the 60s with the Rolling Stones and many other contemporaries, and what a life she led. Boy, so those sorts of books about people who have led interesting lives are fascinating to me. So I read that, and a lot of history as well.
Because writers need to read to connect and to learn more and stay in the moment, don't they?
Yeah, people said to me that I hadn't written very much before these 2 books, other than business reports, and people said to me, "You've done a lot of reading. Why don't you do some writing?" So it's time. So even though I'd turned 70, which is probably an unusual time to start a new career in writing.
Nothing's ever too late.
You're right. And I just took to it like a duck to water. I've really enjoyed the whole process of writing both books, and it's been a real joy. And I suppose when else in life do you get the opportunity to look back and examine your earlier life so forensically, which I was forced to do, and it was a real joy. It was cathartic as well, and there were some dark moments as I was rereading aspects of my life. But I didn't want to pull any punches, so everything's there on the page in both books. As I say, really love the process of writing.
I think I reflected on a lot, and as a reader, if you've gained some insight and you've really taken things on board, that's a successful reading outcome. It's worked.
Well, thank you, Suze. That's, you're never quite sure of the quality of your own writing. I was satisfied that I was getting everything out and that I was injecting humour into it. But the feedback I got from the first book was really, really very flattering, and I was very, very pleased with it. And so let's hope that the second book is received equally as well. I have to say that I think that my writing probably improved with the second book. That flowed, I got into the rhythm of it a bit better. I think the first book was okay, but I think the second book was easier to write, and it just flowed
and
more
it came
easily.
a little bit. That's actually really good advice for people thinking, for considering a memoir, because obviously Jess Mudder, she's written a couple, and we're passionate about getting those personal stories out. So you're testament to that if you give it a go, there's lots to be told.
Yeah, there certainly is. We all have interesting phases in our life, and this particularly, the whole period of time in Australia, and my association with it, and my actions and the reactions of everything that occurred during that time. It was very, very special and vivid in my mind throughout all of these years, intervening years. And it was just wonderful, as I said before, to put it on the page and let other people share it.
You've got a good memory, Bruce. It's helped along by the letters and the correspondence.
Yeah, diaries. I kept a diary too, so that helped. And I think when you're travelling, really have that intense awareness of what's going on around you.
Yes.
And I think
the food and the bus trips and all the things that remind you of those locations, the book you picked up, and that will remind you where you were. So, there's lots of little reminders, I suppose, just by those everyday things.
Yes. And when you're in lonely circumstances, and even though there's lots of guides around you and insurance, you do a lonely moment. So reading books was always terrific too. Very difficult under the kerosene lamps because there was no electricity in the shearing sheds back then.
None of it was easy, was it? So, Bruce, tell me, you've been through a lot for love. What advice would you give to young blokes facing situations in a very emotional stage of life?
I'm very cautious about offering advice on matters of the heart. If you keep your feet on the ground, you work through things, stay positive, things usually tend to work themselves out in the right way in the end. And the times were really tempestuous, but I wouldn't have met any other way, and I really enjoyed all of those experiences. And the young people, just embrace life and enjoy it. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So I kind of like, who I liked in your book? I liked Cliff. So have you Cliff was a gentleman that gave you some advice. He was a teacher, wasn't he? So
yeah.
So you were labouring and he was giving you some advice, some life advice, and that was quite touching. Have you ever been on the other side of that? Have you been able to help a young bloke?
Yeah, it's interesting. I had a long career in business, and the first half or more of my business life was all about climbing the corporate ladder, getting on, ambition, and succeeding as an individual within the company. It was a very big multinational company, so there were plenty of opportunities, and I grasped every one of them. But in the back half of that career, I found I gained a great deal more satisfaction from helping younger people develop their careers. And so no question that there's an intense amount of enjoyment from doing things like that and being involved with younger people. And that's flowed through in my long association with sport. I'm a life member of the local football netball club and still been associated up until this day. So mixing with young people helps keep me young, and where I can offer some advice to them, I do so, but very carefully, because young people have their own lives to lead. Yeah. And you really should only be offering advice when they really ask for it. But occasionally that happens, and I'm always happy.
You could even you're equipped to give advice on book writing now, Bruce.
You think so? Oh, I'm not so sure.
Did you ever think that would happen?
No. I'm planning, as I did with the first book, to do some public presentations about the book and the writing of the book. So I enjoy doing that, and I'll do that again with this book as well. So, it depends on the audience and what they're seeking from me talking about my work. Yeah.
That's kind of a full circle moment, really. You've prepared your book. You've worked hard to do 2 books. you'll have a launch. You'll have you'll have a in-person launch. I think you're doing that next year. You've got radio spots lined up. It is a holistic way that it's happened for you. So you'll be now going to library events. You'll be chatting to people. So it does. It's like it's a full circle moment, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I like to think so. You don't write these books just for yourself. You write them for the readers, the potential readers. You'd like to think that a few people will read it and get something from it. If they just entertain and get a few chuckles, that's fine too.
Yeah, no, I did. It was very, very enjoyable. So another little question is, I guess along the way, luck seemed to work well for you sometimes. I think you were about to get belted again, and I think a young guy called Dicko appeared out of nowhere when you needed a hand. Were there some of these lucky moments that happened more, like, did that happen frequently for you?
Yes, it's amazing when you put yourself into strange situations, what can happen. And that particular incident that happened after I'd suffered some severe concussion from an earlier blow in the shearing sheds, and I was making my way back home, and I was sitting on the side of the road after eating some fish and chips, and a big V8 Ford growled into the main street of the country town I was in, and they all bundled out, and they were all ready to belt me up. And as I was squaring up, Dicko, another guy who happened to be in town, he'd come back to see his sick father from the shearing sheds, and he emerged from the pub with a couple of mates and said, "Leave him alone," and they all scarpered. So I was very lucky. Yeah.
And you didn't even really know him very well, but he's just, the connection was there.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And you did the right thing.
Yeah, that's right. And there are lots of strange moments where things occur that you weren't expecting, but that's part of the fun of the adventure of the whole trip, constantly changing the events in your life. It was quite remarkable.
I liked the little incidental moments, like hearing about the sausage rolls and the vanilla slice and the food. Have you noticed, this is kind of a random question, because I guess when you bought the book and you bought the food, and they're those memories that you remember bits and pieces. Do you miss things like pasties in the old school bakeries? Because that's changed, hasn't it? Because my dad always asked for a pasty, and they don't exist anymore.
Well, they do but not as regularly as they did back then. But of course, again, this is an indication of the change of times. There was no KFC and no McDonald's. So takeaway food was some stale sandwiches at the local milk bar, or an overly heated for several days pie or pasty or something. I thought it was important to convey some of that as part of the story, because our diet when we were travelling around was not so great. And in the shearing sheds, it was just remarkable. I mean, the diet of just meat was...
that was crazy.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that shearers and rouseabouts, as the workers are called in the shearing sheds, demand is a good cook, and they demand lots of food, and there was not much interest in vegetables, but there was plenty of meat. Everything was laid out at breakfast, lunch and dinner on big barbecues, and there was every form of meat that you could imagine, and usually a bit of token tomato and onion on the side.
Onion, yep.
As a nod to a balanced diet, but most of it was just rissoles, sausages, steaks, everything, at every meal. And I'd been deprived of meat growing up as a youngster. It was an expensive thing to buy from my parents. So that was like nirvana. That was fantastic. But after about a week of a diet of nothing but meat, you're looking for some alternative.
One breakfast time, I think you ate cornflakes, and didn't they call you a pussy? You were very
absolutely
down about the cornflakes.
Yeah, I had the temerity to open the cornflakes, which had remained unopened for several weeks, and I thought I'd go with them. And I was ridiculed quite severely for that. Yes.
Oh, and I was going to ask you about. I know I'm going backwards and forwards with all my questions, but the music in the shearing sheds, Bruce, you would have missed out then.
Yes.
And was it like you were reading? Was it? I know how much you loved your music, and I think after you left the sheds, it had been weeks, and you were at a party.
Yes, we
finally got to.
Yeah, we've driven from Oakwood Station, 50 kilometres to get into the nearest town, which was called Augathella. And on one of those Saturday nights that we drove into town, a group of young females that had decided to have a party, and they were trying to be very selective about the males who were invited, but we managed to get ourselves an invite. And so but what was astonishing was not just getting female company, which was wonderful, having a dance, but listening to music again. This young lady that was holding the party, she had a remarkable music collection of music from that era, all on lives, of course, the little discs. So there was the Stones and the Hollies and the Animals and Australian groups like the Easy Beats and Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs, and another group called The Group. I've recorded my reactions to hearing that music again, and the enjoyment of dancing with females in this outside party in the heat of Queensland. It was quite nice. Yeah, it was wonderful.
I think I might ask you about encouraging others to write their memoir. What would you tell them? What would you tell them about jotting down their thoughts and just going for it?
There's obviously a number of different ways of going about this, and I think the sensible people go away and do writing courses and things like that. But because these stories have been in my head for so long, I just wanted to get them out onto the page, and so I just simply sat down and started writing. That was right for me. It's not necessarily right for other people. So just enjoying that whole process was so wonderful. So whether you have your book published or not, but just the process of writing, whether it's fiction or non-fiction, it's just a pure joy for me, and I think for many other authors too. I do know that it's hard work for some authors. I didn't find it so, probably because those stories have been locked away for so long in my head, and I had to get them out. So it was really good. So my recommendation to anybody that's thinking about the possibility of writing a book, whatever the subject matter is, give it a go. No, nothing to stop you, and the outcomes can be quite profound, and it was for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was a great outcome if you you decided to get it down and you went for it. I think that we can procrastinate and we can overthink, but I think this is a good news story, and it's worked out really well for you.
Well, thank you, Suze. It's been a pleasure to write and a pleasure to work with Hembury Books and getting everything out there. It'll be interesting to see the feedback I get from this second memoir, and your mates that read these sorts of things, particularly those that knew me in that era, not shy about coming forward with their opinions, but for the most part, they've been pretty good.
We'll see what they've got to say. Yeah, I can't wait to hear about the feedback either. So do let us know, Bruce. So I'd like to wrap it up now and wish you every success with your book as it becomes available in copy to order tomorrow. Congratulations from us all, Bruce. And,
well, thank you. And we should say that you can order the book through any good bookstore, of course. It's easy to order also from Amazon in ebook format or paperback. So there's numerous ways to go about it. And if you'd like to know more, just go to my website, which will explain more about the book and how to purchase it if you'd like to do that. And the website's easy to find. It's just www.brucelowery.com. So if people are interested, and feedback would be very important too. If you wanted to contact me through my website, love to hear from you and what your opinions are about both books. Thank you.
Yes, it's really, really important for any reader to review a book that they read. It really helps the author spread the word. And as Bruce said, there's numerous online retailers you can go to get Bruce's second book, Out of Time, and of course, Catch the Wind as well. So thanks for coming back for your second Bruce, Bruce. And so I hope everybody enjoys our launch today. Thanks, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you, Suze. I really appreciate your time and the way you've interviewed. They're quite probing questions, and I've enjoyed the process very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce. It's great teamwork. See you later.
Bye.